Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we take a deep dive into one of the most fascinating stories in coin collecting history, a story that combines the allure of hidden treasure with the rich history of American minting, and in this case we are going to focus on the 1972 $2 coin, a seemingly ordinary piece of circulating currency that, because of its unique errors and rare minting mistakes, has been rumored to reach a staggering value of $49 million in the collector's market, a value so high that it might sound unbelievable, but when we break down the factors that make such a coin desirable, you will begin to see how rarity, error types, condition, provenance, and collector demand all combine to push a humble 25-cent piece into the stratosphere of numismatic legend. And so let's begin by talking about what makes error coins so valuable in the first place. Because the concept is very important to understand, since most coins struck by the U.S. Mint go through precise production processes with quality control designed to prevent mistakes, and when millions or even billions of coins are struck in a given year, the vast majority look identical, but every now and then, something goes wrong in the minting process, such as a double die, an off-center strike, a misaligned die, a clipped planchette, wrong metal composition, die cracks, die clashes, or even experimental test strikes that were never intended to circulate, and these mistakes escape the mint and end up in the hands of the public, and that is when collectors notice them, study them, catalog them, and in some cases bid astronomical amounts to own them, because error coins are like fingerprints of history, each one unique, unrepeatable, and often carrying a story that fascinates collectors for decades. So with the 1972 $2 we find ourselves at a particularly intriguing moment in minting history, as the early 1970s was a time of transition in coinage. With the removal of silver from circulating quarters in the 1960s and the solidification of copper-nickel-clad coinage becoming the new standard, and the mint was working at full capacity to keep up with the demands of commerce, meaning that errors from that era are both likely and collectible, and so collectors look very closely at quarters from the early 70s, especially 1970, 1971, 1972, and 1973, to identify rare varieties that can fetch huge sums, and the 1972 quarter has some well-documented error types, most famously double dies where the design elements appear doubled because of hubbing misalignment during die creation, and these double dies can manifest on the date, the motto "In God We Trust," the word liberty, or even the reverse details like the eagle's wings or the denomination $2, and when such doubling is strong and dramatic, collectors consider it very valuable, especially in high grades. And another known error from 1972 quarters is off-center strikes where the coin was not properly centered between the dies, causing part of the design to be missing, with the blank planchette showing on one side, and depending on how off-center the strike is, the value can rise sharply, with dramatic off-center strikes commanding tens of thousands of dollars, and there are also broad strikes where the collar fails to contain the metal, leading to a coin that spreads out larger than normal, as well as clipped planchets where a portion of the coin is missing because of the way the blank was cut out of the metal sheet, and let's not forget about transitional errors where wrong planchets are used, such as a quarter being struck on a nickel planchette, dime planchette, or even foreign coin planchette, and those wrong planchette errors are particularly exciting because they represent major blunders at the mint. And some of the rarest 1972 quarters are believed to have been struck on experimental or transitional metals, which immediately drives up collector interest. And then there are die cracks and die breaks, which happen when the die develops a fracture and transfers that line or blob of extra metal onto the coin, giving it unique raised features that can resemble anything from lightning bolts to cuds covering parts of the design, and many collectors enjoy these as mint-made sculptures, and while not all die cracks are worth millions, some dramatic ones can significantly increase value. And then we must also consider strike-through errors where foreign material like grease, cloth, or even a small piece of wire got between the die and planchette during striking, leaving behind an impression or gap that makes the coin completely unique, and all these varieties together make the 1972 quarter a fertile ground for collectors searching for hidden treasures in their change jars. But the question remains, how does a coin like this end up being worth $49 million? And the answer lies in the convergence of factors such as extreme rarity, high-grade preservation, dramatic or multiple errors combined in a single coin, and the fierce bidding wars among collectors who want to own a once-in-a-lifetime piece, and stories circulate in the numismatic world about special 1972 quarters that combine multiple dramatic errors, such as a double die obverse with an off-center strike and on the wrong planchette. And when such a piece surfaces in pristine condition, collectors know that it is virtually one of a kind, and in a hobby where rarity rules, uniqueness commands astronomical premiums, and then there's the factor of provenance, meaning the history of the coin's ownership, as coins that have been featured in major auctions, studied in numismatic journals, or held by famous collectors tend to gain additional value, and in some cases the mystique surrounding a coin pushes its value beyond any logical price, making it more like a piece of fine art than a piece of money, and in this sense, a 1972 quarter rumored to be worth $49 million is less about the intrinsic value of the metal and more about the historical significance, the narrative of its minting eras, and the intense passion of collectors who want to own the crown jewel of their collections. And when you think about it, this is what makes coin collecting so fascinating, because every pocket change coin has the potential to hide a story worth millions, and ordinary people can stumble upon these treasures if they pay close attention. And indeed, there have been numerous stories of people finding rare quarters in circulation or in old jars tucked away in attics, only to later discover that their find was worth thousands or even millions, and this is why the 1972 quarter has become such a legendary topic among enthusiasts, because it embodies the dream of discovering hidden wealth in something so ordinary. And now let's explore the specific eras that drive up the value further, starting with the double die varieties, because in 1972 the process of hubbing dies involved multiple impressions, and if the die and hub were not perfectly aligned, doubling would occur, and while minor doubling is somewhat common, dramatic double dies where the letters in Liberty or the date 1972 are clearly doubled without magnification are extremely scarce, and when one of those coins appears at auction in gem uncirculated condition, the price soars, sometimes into 6 or 7 figures, and when collectors whisper about examples that combine such doubling with other mistakes like off-center strikes or transitional planches, the theoretical value climbs into tens of millions. And next we should talk about the off-metal strikes, which are among the most exciting eras, because a 1972 quarter struck on a silver planchette from leftover pre-1965 stock or on a planchette intended for another denomination creates a completely unique collectible, and testing these coins through metal analysis has confirmed that some wrong planchette errors from this era do exist, and when paired with dramatic minting mistakes, they become incredibly valuable. And then we have to consider condition, because the grading scale used by numismatists ranges from poor all the way up to mint state 70, and a coin in lower grades might still be interesting, but one preserved in gem mint state with full luster and nowhere will always be more desirable. And this is why some 1972 quarters, carefully preserved and later discovered with major errors, have achieved legendary status. And another point to emphasize is the role of auctions, because high-profile auction houses bring together wealthy collectors who are willing to outbid one another to secure rarities, and when bidding wars erupt over coins like this, the price can skyrocket well beyond initial estimates, leading to records being broken, and each record fuels the legend of the coin even more, creating a cycle where the mystique builds, the demand rises, and the price climbs higher. And when we talk about the 1972 quarter fetching $49 million, it is in this context, where the combination of dramatic errors, pristine preservation, unique provenance, and bidding frenzy leads to values that transcend the coin's original face value. And for many collectors, owning such a piece is not just about investment but about pride, history, and the thrill of holding a true rarity. And so the 1972 quarter dollar serves as a reminder that every coin tells a story. And some stories are worth millions, and this is why you should always check your change. Next, we dive into one of the most fascinating topics in the world of rare coins and hidden treasures, a story that takes us deep into the history of American coinage, the peculiarities of minting, and the astonishing values collectors are willing to pay when a coin carries not just monetary worth but also historical intrigue, rarity, and unique minting errors. And today we're focusing on the 1980s D quarter dollar coin, a coin that has taken the attention of collectors, enthusiasts, and investors alike, because it has been rumored to cost as much as $24 million due to its errors, mistakes, and unusual characteristics that make it far more than just a piece of change you'd find rattling at the bottom of your pocket. So let's set the stage by remembering that in 1980 the United States Mint was operating at full capacity, pushing out millions upon millions of coins from its Denver facility marked with the familiar D Mint mark, coins that most Americans use daily without even thinking about their production. But what few realized is that even the most advanced minting facilities sometimes produce coins that contain errors, whether from misaligned dies, doubled images, wrong planches, off-center strikes, missing elements, or other anomalies that slip through the quality checks and end up in circulation, and these very errors are what can transform a common coin into a multi-million-dollar treasure, and the 1980 quarter dollar is a perfect example of how mistakes can turn something ordinary into something extraordinary, because within this year and mint mark combination a small number of coins were struck with unusual errors and characteristics that have intrigued collectors for decades. And these mistakes can range from subtle doubling on the inscriptions like Liberty or In God We Trust to dramatic striking issues like an off-center strike where part of the design is cut off or a broad strike that extends beyond the normal rim, each of these quirks adding layers of value and uniqueness to the coin. And in the world of coin collecting, the 1980 quarter is particularly notable because certain specimens have displayed a combination of errors that are extremely rare. For instance, some coins show a strong doubling on Washington's profile, while others may have been struck on planches intended for other denominations such as a nickel or even a foreign coin. And when such anomalies are discovered, they become sensational finds because they are so rare that collectors are willing to bid astronomical sums to own them. And this is why we hear of a 1980 quarter dollar valued at $24 million, not because every coin from that year and mint is worth such a fortune, but because a unique specimen carrying extraordinary minting mistakes has reached a mythical status in numismatic circles, sparking tales of hidden wealth and encouraging treasure hunters to search their change jars, old coin rolls, and inherited collections in hopes of uncovering one of these gems. And when we think about why such a coin could command such a staggering value, we must consider not just the rarity of the error but also the condition of the coin, the historical context, and the competitive drive among wealthy collectors to own something truly one of a kind, because in auctions rarity combined with demand can drive prices into territories unimaginable for everyday people. And so the 1980 quarter stands as a shining example of how mistakes at the mint become miracles for collectors. But to really appreciate the possibilities, let's break down the types of errors that could exist on a coin like this, starting with die errors such as double die obverse, where Washington's portrait may show doubling particularly around the eyes, lips, or nose, giving the face an unusual shadowed appearance that is highly sought after. Or double die reverse, where inscriptions like United States of America or quarter dollar may appear slightly overlapped or doubled. And then there are planchette errors, which can be even more dramatic, like wrong planchette strikes where the quarter was accidentally struck on a nickel or dime blank, leading to a coin that is smaller, thinner, or lighter than a normal quarter, or even struck on a planchette intended for a foreign coin, which would make the piece a true outlier in American coinage. And then we have striking errors where coins may be off-center, showing a crescent of blank metal where the design did not land correctly, or broad strikes where the design spreads outward, giving the coin an odd flattened look without a raised rim, and even clipped planches where a portion of the coin is missing as if someone had taken a bite out of it, each of these mistakes creating intrigue, rarity, and ultimately value. And when you imagine a 1980 quarter dollar that perhaps combines multiple such errors, struck in brilliant condition and surviving without circulation wear, it becomes understandable why collectors may value it in the tens of millions, because in the world of numismatics, provenance, rarity, and uniqueness always drive demand, and beyond errors there is also the possibility of varieties in design or composition, for example transitional errors where a coin may have been struck with leftover planches from previous years containing different metal alloys, or experimental strikes where a coin may not conform to the usual copper-nickel clad composition of quarters from 1980 but instead be an accidental trial piece. And if such a coin survived the mint's usual melting process, it would instantly become one of the rarest American coins in existence. And let's not forget about mechanical doubling and die deterioration doubling, which although more common can sometimes produce dramatic visual effects that trick the eye and increase interest among collectors. And while many of these varieties may not reach multi-million-dollar values individually, when combined or presented in pristine condition, they can create an unprecedented demand. And what makes the 1980s quarter so compelling is the idea that in an era of massive production where billions of coins were minted, a few slipped through the cracks carrying incredible errors, surviving in pockets, jars, or collections for decades before being recognized for their rarity. And in numismatic history we've seen time and again how such coins rise in value. Just think about the 1955 double die cent, the 1932 Washington quarters in key mint marks, or the 1970s small date cent, all of which have achieved iconic status, and now the 1980s quarter stands among them as a legend of error coinage with its rumored $24 million valuation. And when we look at the psychology of collecting, it becomes clear why people chase after such rarities. Because owning a unique coin is not just about wealth but about possessing a tangible piece of history that no one else can claim, a symbol of the quirks of human engineering, the unpredictability of minting processes, and the enduring power of rarity, and so collectors are willing to pay whatever it takes to acquire it, sometimes pushing auction prices into stratospheric figures. And it also highlights how important it is for everyday people to check their change carefully, because the next multi-million-dollar treasure might be sitting unnoticed in a drawer or old coin album. And so the story of the 1980 AD quarter dollar valued at $24 million is not just about a coin but about the thrill of discovery, the fascination of errors, the history of American minting, and the extraordinary power of rarity in shaping value. And as we continue exploring its possibilities, we realize that there could be dozens of error types that exist in this series, ranging from die cracks where raised lines appear across Washington's profile to cuds where pieces of the die broke off leaving large blobs of metal, or even misaligned dies where one side of the coin does not line up with the other, creating an eerie and unusual look that collectors treasure. And when such errors are bold, dramatic, and visually striking, they can capture the imagination of the numismatic world, adding more layers to the legend of the 1980s D quarter. And we cannot overlook the role of condition either, because a coin in mint state, preserved with its original luster, free from scratches or wear, will always command more attention and higher prices than one that circulated for decades. So if the multi-million-dollar specimen is in pristine condition, then its value makes even more sense. And when rumors of such a coin surface, they fuel a frenzy of searching, as people rush to examine their old rolls of quarters, coin jars, and inherited collections, hoping that lightning might strike twice and that they too might uncover a hidden fortune. And this is the magic of numismatics, where small pieces of metal become vessels of history, art, and incredible value. And the 1980 AD quarter dollar valued at $24 million stands as a testament to the extraordinary possibilities hidden in everyday objects, reminding us all that sometimes the smallest mistakes can lead to the greatest treasures. So keep your eyes open, your change close, and your curiosity alive, because the world of rare coins is full of surprises waiting to be discovered. And as you think about this fascinating story, remember that subscribing and staying connected will keep you updated with more incredible tales of hidden wealth, extraordinary coins, and the endless adventure of discovering treasures in the most unexpected places. Last, we are about to dive into one of the most fascinating and jaw-dropping stories in the world of rare coins and hidden treasures, and this time it's all about the 1977 quarter dollar coin, a coin that on the surface may look just like any other quarter you might find jingling in your pocket or sitting at the bottom of a jar of loose change, but which in some extremely rare cases has been valued at an unbelievable $14 million due to certain mistakes, minting errors, and peculiarities that set it apart from the billions of regular examples, making it one of those numismatic mysteries that keeps collectors, historians, and treasure hunters alike completely mesmerized. So let's take a deep dive into exactly why a coin minted in such massive numbers could turn into something worth more than entire mansions, luxury cars, or even private islands, and how tiny details, overlooked imperfections, and quirks in the production process have transformed the 1977 quarter from just another everyday piece of change into a coin worth big money, a coin that tells a story not just about its metallic composition but about the history of minting in America, the fascination of collectors with rarity and uniqueness, and the sheer unpredictability of what makes something valuable. When we talk about the 1977 quarter, we're discussing a coin that belongs to the Washington Quarter series, a design introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and by 1977 the design had already been in circulation for decades, making it seem like just another standard issue. Yet within the flood of coins produced in that year there exist examples that bear the marks of minting mishaps, double strikes, off-center imprints, wrong planchet strikes, and die breaks that all contribute to the mythos of why certain versions of this coin are so valuable, and in rare cases, astronomically so, because when the tiniest deviation from the norm occurs in the minting process, it can create a collectible so rare that people with deep pockets are willing to pay millions for the privilege of owning it. Imagine for a moment that you are looking at a 1977 quarter under magnification, and at first it seems ordinary: George Washington's profile on the obverse side, the American eagle on the reverse, the copper nickel-clad composition shining with that familiar silvery appearance. But then you notice something is off. Maybe the lettering of Liberty looks doubled, maybe the date seems to have an extra impression, maybe the eagle's wings are struck unevenly, maybe there is a die crack running across Washington's face, and suddenly you realize you could be holding a minting error that turns a 25-cent piece into a multi-million-dollar rarity. And this is where the true excitement comes in, because collectors know that such errors are like lightning in a bottle. They happen rarely, they survive only if the coin makes it out of the mint without being caught. And they are preserved only if people accidentally keep them rather than spending them back into circulation. Some of the most notable types of errors that make the 1977 quarter incredibly valuable include off-center strikes where the design is shifted so much that part of the blank planchet remains visible, creating a dramatic and unusual look that collectors adore. Double dies where the coin's details appear doubled due to a misalignment in the hubbing process, giving a ghostly or lead effect to words, dates, or images. Wrong planchet errors where the quarter is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different coin such as a nickel or a dime, drastically altering its weight and appearance, and die breaks or cuds where part of the die collapses or cracks leaving raised blobs of metal on the coin, creating a one-of-a-kind signature of imperfection. Each of these errors turns an otherwise ordinary quarter into something extraordinary, and the value skyrockets not just because of the mistake itself but because of how few examples exist, how dramatic the error is, and how much collectors are willing to pay for the novelty of owning something so unusual. And in the case of the $14 million 1977 quarter, we are talking about a perfect storm of rarity, desirability, and condition, a coin that might combine multiple striking anomalies and has survived in a near-pristine state, making it the holy grail for quarter collectors. But what's fascinating is that the story doesn't stop at just identifying the types of errors, because the context of 1977 itself plays a role, a time when the US Mint was producing millions upon millions of quarters across its facilities in Philadelphia and Denver, a time before advanced computer-assisted quality control systems were fully implemented. A time when the sheer scale of production increased the likelihood of mistakes slipping through, and in those mistakes lies the secret treasure, as a few coins with unique flaws managed to avoid being caught by inspectors and eventually made their way into the pockets, purses, and piggy banks of everyday Americans, only to resurface decades later as pieces of history worth life-changing sums of money. Consider the psychology of collectors as well, because the value of the 1977 quarter doesn't just come from the metal or the error but from the passion and competitive drive of collectors to own something nobody else has, to complete their sets with rare anomalies, to show off a piece of minting history that tells a story of imperfection turned perfection in the eyes of the numismatic world. And this human element is what transforms a coin into an artifact, into an object of desire, into a symbol of rarity commanding prices that defy logic. For example, a quarter struck off-center by just a small margin may be interesting, but a coin struck so far off-center that the date or lettering is missing entirely is exponentially rarer, and when one of those surfaces from the 1977 mintage in immaculate condition, its value can soar not just into the thousands or hundreds of thousands but into millions, especially if it becomes the centerpiece of an auction battle between determined collectors who refuse to let it slip through their fingers. And it is in these heated auctions where stories of $14 million sales are born, where a single coin goes from being changed to being a headline, to being part of numismatic legend. Another fascinating angle to the 1977 quarter story is the possibility of transitional planchet errors, where coins might have been struck using leftover blanks from previous years or experimental materials intended for testing, and if a 1977 quarter exists struck on such a planchet, perhaps silver or aluminum rather than the usual copper-nickel clad, then its uniqueness multiplies its value tenfold, because such anomalies are not just mistakes but historical curiosities showing how the mint operated during that period, offering a tangible connection to decisions, experiments, and accidents that would otherwise be lost to history. There are also rumors and whispers among collectors of proof-like 1977 quarters struck accidentally with dies intended for proof coins, creating mirror-like surfaces and razor-sharp details, a rarity that in itself is sought after, and if combined with an error it becomes even more legendary, turning an already rare coin into something that could command astronomical sums. And while the majority of 1977 quarters remain ordinary, worth face value, the possibility that in any handful of change there could be one of these rare gems is what fuels the excitement, the dream of finding treasure in the most mundane of places, the thrill that drives metal detectorists, roll hunters, and casual coin collectors to keep searching, to keep looking closely at every quarter that passes through their hands. Because stories like the $14 million coin prove that the impossible is sometimes possible, that overlooked details can mean the difference between pocket change and life-changing wealth. This dream of discovery ties into a long history of coin collecting where rarity, error, and condition intersect to create value, where history and craftsmanship collide with chance and imperfection, where a simple coin minted in 1977 becomes an emblem of opportunity. And when we explore this, we also explore the human fascination with rarity, with the stories objects can tell, with the idea that something ordinary can become extraordinary if we look close enough, and the 1977 quarter embodies this perfectly. Every nick, every scratch, every tiny anomaly tells a story of the minting process, of machinery and human oversight, of accidents and escapes, of journeys from mint to pocket to piggy bank to auction house, and in the case of the most valuable examples, it tells a story of how imperfection itself can become perfection in the eyes of those who treasure rarity, and that is why this coin, this 1977 quarter, has reached values as unbelievable as $14 million, not because of what it was meant to be, but because of what it accidentally became, a rare jewel hiding in plain sight, a symbol of the incredible possibilities that still lie hidden in the everyday world. And so, as we bring this story full circle, remember that the tale of the 1977 quarter isn't just about metal and minting but about chance, history, human passion, and the thrill of discovery, and it serves as a reminder to always look closely at the change in your hands, because you never know when you might stumble across a piece of history worth millions. And that dream of turning a simple coin into unimaginable wealth is what makes collecting so endlessly exciting.